the chat for everyone, like Cindy was saying, just so that's not distracting you while you're trying to get through all your info.
Okay, all right.
Okay, should we get started? It looks like we have a full house and there's no one left in the waiting room. So I guess with no further ado, Kim and I did a little tech crisis this morning and we are taking a deep breath and everything is okay. We are on. So also welcome everyone to this forum, which is hosted by ISAC, the Interfaith Solidarity and Accompaniment Coalition. I know many of you have worked with ISAC and you've been to events before, but if you haven't, we welcome you. We're a county-wide, Larimer County-wide coalition of faith communities. And I know this invite went out to a lot of folks that aren't part of the faith communities, and we're so happy to have you here. I see a number of state representatives and staffers here also with us. I know we all know Kim, and so sometimes we don't give her the formal introduction that she deserves. So I'm going to go ahead and read a little more on her background today. Kimberly Baker Medina is a graduate of Bolt Law School from UC Berkeley, and upon graduation, she was awarded with the Berkeley Law Foundation grant, and she formed a peer advocacy project which provided legal services and community organizing for homeless and low-income families in the San Francisco area. She also worked as a director of the Hunger and Homeless Action Coalition of San Mateo County, and then she moved to Honduras for just over 6 years, where she worked on her Spanish, and she became very involved with immigration issues. So when she returned to the US, she settled in Fort Collins, where she had partly grown up, and she specialized in immigration law. She's a founding member of our wonderful community-based organization, Fuerza Latina. She's also a member of AILA, the American Immigration Lawyers Association. And I don't think I need to say it, but I will, just because it's not said enough. Kim has been an absolute champion for immigration rights in all of the Front Range, and has launched many of our local pro bono clinics for DACA and for other immigration legal needs. And we've been waiting actually a year to get this information from Kim today. As it keeps changing, we keep saying, well, let's wait a little longer, let's wait a little longer. And now we're right up against, what will be a set of elections. We want to make sure that Kim can download all that she's been working through in the last 4 years, and much longer than that, a whole career worth of not just studying immigration law, but really having that practical knowledge of working with thousands and thousands of clients in our area. So with no further ado, Kim, take it away.
All right, thank you, Arpi. And thank you to everyone for taking time out of your day today to listen to this information. As we move into the elections in November, it's so important that we know what has actually happened when we weren't looking. And I think that we all know the big ones, right? We all remember the children in cages, and we all remember the family separation, and we all remember the Muslim ban. But most of us have no idea the extent to which this administration has dismantled and damaged our legal immigration system, because most of it is hidden, it's multi-layered, it's subtle, and so we really don't know what's going on. So I really thank you for taking the time today to educate yourselves about what has really happened to our immigration system and to immigrants in our community. Before we move into that, I'm going to do a really quick Immigration 101. Because we need to know why is the election, why are federal elections so important, and why is the executive branch so important in immigration. So the first thing to kind of look at is, like, how do we make immigration law? Obviously, Congress makes the immigration laws, right? And Congress has not acted significantly on immigration since 1996. When they passed the IRA, which is the Immigration Reform and Immigration Responsibility Act, mostly punitive set of laws. But that was the last major congressional act on immigration. So Congress makes the basic laws. We also have some treaties that help us make immigration law. For example, asylum is primarily based on the 1951 Refugee Geneva Convention and then the 1967 Protocol. But aside from Congress, we get a lot of our immigration law from judicial decisions, and those come not from the judicial branch, but from the executive branch as well. So immigration courts are under the Department of Justice. They're not the judicial branch, they are the executive branch. The Executive Office of Immigration Review is where I go with clients, and that's the first court we go to when they're trying to remove people from the United States or strip them of their status, their legal immigration status. That's under the Department of Justice. After that, if you don't win at that level, then you go to the Board of Immigration Appeals, again, under the Department of Justice. In addition, the Attorney General has the power to cite cases to him or herself. So the Attorney General can make law by saying, oh, I don't like this particular area of law. I don't agree with this particular decision. I'm going to write the case to myself, and I'm going to issue a new decision. And under this administration, the Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, and then Attorney General Barr have been very, very busy making law by citing cases to themselves. Finally, there is courts, after you go through that administrative process of immigration courts, you can get to the federal courts, and you're finally at that point in the judicial branch. But most immigrants don't get to that stage. Most people don't get to federal court. They don't have the resources, and so most immigrants are going to be stuck between the laws that Congress makes and the way that the administration interprets those laws. In addition, we get executive orders on immigration. So those, again, are from the executive branch. That is that the president can, in a lot of instances, make an order that will affect immigration law. The administration of immigration laws is also through the executive branch. And there was a restructuring of immigration after 9/11, and everything is now under the Department of Homeland Security. So we see that the administration of laws and the issuance of affirmative benefits is under Department of Homeland Security. That's under United States Citizenship and Immigration Services, USCIS. And so they process paperwork, they process work permits, they take applications, and they can give people status. Also, for people who are processing their case overseas, they would be dealing with the Department of State, again, executive branch, right? And so they're dealing with the Department of State overseas. The enforcement of immigration laws is also under the executive branch. And ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, is under the Department of Homeland Security. So you have this somewhat strange structure where the Department of Homeland Security umbrellas both the administration of the laws and the enforcement of the laws. Again, all under the executive branch. So we can see that there's a lot of power there. How do people legally get status? Well, there are kind of three main paths. One is family-based, so family members of citizens and family members of green card holders, who are lawful permanent residents. A lot of people think of them as green card holders, but lawful permanent residents, the actual term. About 70% of these family-based cases are processed abroad. This is going to be important when we come later to one of the changes that this administration made. And about 65% of green cards issued go to family members, okay? So about 65% of the people that get lawful permanent residency do it through that path of a family member. So a citizen or a lawful permanent resident submits a petition for that. You can also obtain lawful permanent residence through an employer. So an employer can petition for someone. The majority of employment-based residencies are processed in the United States, but that's another path for lawful residency. And in addition, there are a lot of employment-based work visas. And the final path is the humanitarian path. So those would be things like asylum, people who come here because they're suffering persecution, refugees, or victims of crime or victims of human trafficking. And those people can also obtain permanent residency in the United States. So what has President Trump and his administration, what have they wanted to do with immigration? It's not a huge secret. They want to eliminate family-based immigration. Remember, we just said that over 65% of lawful permanent residents get their residency through family-based immigration. And one of the things the administration wants to do is eliminate those categories. They want to dismantle asylum protections. There's no secret there. They've made no secret over the fact that they want to dismantle asylum protections. They They want to increase the removal of people who are in the country without status, so removal of immigrants. They want to reduce lawful immigration, and they want to implement sort of a merits-based process for immigration and other policies that basically weed out people of color. They weed out low-income people, they weed out people from non-English speaking countries, and they would weed out people of color. And I don't think that the administration has kept these goals a secret. I think they've been pretty clear on those goals. So what have they been able to do? That's what we're going to talk about today. And this is not an inclusive list. What I'm going to talk about today is the tip of a very, very evil and insidious iceberg. And there is we're sharing a link with a document by the Migration Policy Institute. It's 126 pages that summarizes, it really includes summaries of the actions of this administration over the last 4 years, 126 pages. I'm not going to talk about all those. I'm going to try to focus on this year, 2020, and what's happened while we have all been occupied with keeping ourselves safe, keeping ourselves healthy, and dealing with the coronavirus. So what has the administration been doing during this time? Okay. So one thing that the administration has talked about is increasing detentions and increasing arrests of undocumented people. And in fact, they have been fairly successful in that. More people have been placed in deportation, and they've removed a lot of the protections that some people had. So, for example, prior to this administration, the previous administration, the Obama administration, had set up a system of priorities for deportation. So if you were the spouse and parent of US citizens, you had no criminal history, you'd lived here for 20 years, and somehow they picked you up, they had the ability to look at that case and say, oh, we're not gonna continue with this case, we're gonna go after the, the violent criminal. That's the person we're gonna deport. That was eliminated, so we don't have that anymore. Everyone is now a priority for removal. So whoever gets picked up, regardless of their record, is an equal priority for removal, and they will proceed with that case to the finish. During the Obama administration, we were able to obtain administrative closure for a lot of cases. That means that the government prosecutors looked at cases on their docket and said, oh, this is not a priority for removal. Let's let this person stay here with their family. What this administration has done is they have ordered government attorneys to review all of those cases closed under Obama. And there are many, many, many of those cases. And right now, during coronavirus, those cases are being reopened. So I have a lot of clients whose case was closed years ago, 10 years ago, longer, and all of a sudden they're getting a notice that they have to appear back in immigration proceedings. Victims of crime, previously, if they were applying, say, for a U visa, which, by the way, takes 5 or 6 years, previously we were able to postpone that deportation and let that person wait for their victim visa, that is for their legal status as a crime victim. We can't do that anymore. The courts and the prosecutors have been ordered to proceed with those deportations, even though that crime victim may have an application pending for relief. There was an Obama policy of not detaining pregnant women. So under the Obama administration, if Immigration and Customs Enforcement came across a pregnant woman, they might issue her a notice to appear in deportation proceedings, but they would not take her into custody. That also was ended by this administration, so that pregnant women are now taken into custody. In addition, what this administration is doing is that they are reviewing the cases of people who have DACA who were previously in deportation. So let's say, for example, I have a client and that client was picked up on a traffic ticket and placed in deportation. And let's say that years ago, in 2013, this client came to me and I realized the client was qualified for DACA and I got that client DACA. So the client's been here with DACA since 2013. The administration is reviewing those cases and reopening some of those cases of people who have been in DACA status but were previously in deportation. Another thing the administration did, now this was not during coronavirus, but it's very important, is that they, in July of last year, they tried to expand something called expedited removal. So the law has always been that if you are within 100 miles of the border and have been here for a minimum amount of time, the Border Patrol could pick you up and deport you without giving you the right to see a judge. And what this administration is trying to do is expand that into the interior, so that if someone is in the state of Colorado and they come into contact with ICE, that they could just instantly deport them without having a chance to see a judge. That's been enjoined, so a lot of the things this administration has done are being fought in the federal courts. There's currently an injunction on that, but they're trying that. Another thing the administration has been doing is cracking down on sanctuary policies. Another thing they've been doing is encouraging cooperation with ICE, and they've also increased worksite enforcement. So we can see that in fiscal year 2017, they opened about 1,691 worksite investigations. In fiscal year 2019, they ordered 6,812 worksite investigations. A lot of the changes that the administration has been doing that kind of fly under the radar are what they're doing in the courts. And for those of us who defend immigrants in deportation proceedings, these have been hugely impactful. One thing that we're seeing is that we have unprecedented backlogs in our immigration courts. Obviously, I mean, they keep putting more people in deportation, right? And so all these cases that were closed and taken off of judges' dockets are being put back on their dockets, as well as the increased enforcement, as well as denying people benefits and putting it. So we see we have a huge backlog. It increased over 71% between fiscal year 2017 and fiscal year 2020. There's well over 1 million cases backlogged. The courts have been closed since March. They're just starting to reopen the courts. And they continue placing more and more and more people in deportation proceedings. Another thing that the administration did, again, this was not during coronavirus, but it's really important, is they started a pilot program of accelerated deportation of families. This came about because this administration has a particular hatred for asylum seekers. I don't know the other way to say it. They've launched just an unprecedented attack on people who are seeking asylum in our country. And a lot of the people seeking asylum in our country are families, primarily women and children, who come to the southern border. So one of the things that this administration did is, well, they've tried a lot of things. They tried separating families, they tried locking families up, they tried all of that. And one of the things that they tried is in November of 2018, they started a pilot program where they chose 10 locations, Denver is one of them, where they created an accelerated deportation program just for people who arrive with children. So if you arrived after January of 2019 by yourself, your case is proceeding along at the usual very, very slow rate. If you arrived after January of 2019 with a child, you have 365 days or less to fight your case, which is really not enough time to prepare a complex asylum case, especially because most people don't understand that they only have 365 days. Most people don't have attorneys. If they get attorneys, they get them in the last 90 days of those 365 days. At present, we have, well, by January of 2020, we've had over 118,000 family units in this program. And Denver is one of those locations. So I have a lot of clients who are in this program. One of the things that the administration has really focused on is stripping away due process protections for immigrants in immigration court. And they're able to do this because, as we saw, these courts are under the executive branch. So they've taken a host of acts. And if you looked at that 126-page document, you'll see it's just amazing the things that they've thought of. But some of those include limiting requests for continuances. So people who go in and say, oh, well, I need to continue my case to get an attorney. The judge can say no. Or if the attorney goes in and say, oh, I'm doing this asylum case, we need a continuance because I need to get a forensic exam of the, the cigarette burns on my client, right? Like that's a real case I have. And the judge has the power to say no, and the government will object to any and all continuances. They've weakened procedures that were put in place to help children who are in deportation proceedings. Children are placed in deportation proceedings. They're not given a free attorney, so a lot of these kids don't have an attorney. And there were specific procedures in place to make courts a little more child-friendly, which is kind of an awful thought, but at least, those protections were in place, and those protections have been weakened or in some cases completely stripped away. The government has ended what we call administrative closure. So when I talked previously about all of those cases that we closed under the Obama administration, that's called administrative closure, and it allows us to do a lot of things. One thing that it allows us to do is keep people with their families if they're not a danger here and if they have a lot of really strong equities, right? So we're not able to do that anymore. The other thing that we can do with administrative closure is that when people are fixing their status because of a spousal petition, so let's say that I marry someone from another country and I want that person to fix their status here. If I administratively close the case, that person can do all of their processing here and get a pardon and everything that's needed and not have to go to the foreign country for a long period of time. They've ended that so that US citizens who are married to immigrants who are trying to fix their status, if that person is in deportation proceedings, they have to leave the country for a number of years. Whereas previously under the Obama administration, we were able to do all of those things here. So they've done that as well. We have seen, as I mentioned previously, unprecedented numbers of decisions coming from the Attorney General making immigration law. And I'm just going to cover a couple of these and how they relate to immigration courts, people in removal, and due process protections. So what happens here is the Attorney General cites a case to him or herself, in this case, Attorney General Sessions, Attorney General Barr, and then they make law, they write a decision. So they've written decisions limiting the rights of asylum seekers to a full hearing. They've issued decisions limiting asylum for victims of private violence. People who are seeking persecution because of their membership in a particular social group. This particularly affects women. It affects victims of gender-based violence. It affects people who are fleeing gang violence. And this was a huge case, matter of AB, and what Attorney Sessions did is he took the case of a woman fleeing domestic violence, horrific domestic violence, and she had repeatedly asked the government for help, and they would not help her. And she was granted asylum, and the Attorney General took that case and said, no, we're not going to recognize this basis for asylum. That's had a huge impact. I can't even begin to tell you how many families and women I work with who are coming from countries where men can beat their wives, men can kill their wives, and the government does nothing. And prior to this administration, those were cases that we could get asylum for these women, and it's very difficult, if not impossible. And when we do win a case, the government then appeals, and then of course we're in this process where we're going to those appeal courts that again are under the executive branch. But this case had a huge impact. They ended continuances for people with other applications pending. So let's say that I'm married to a US citizen and that person has filed for me, but that case is going to take a year or so to process. We used to be able to ask the judge to stop the deportation while I was waiting for that application. They've ended that. So they'll plow forward with the deportation regardless of the fact that you have other relief pending. They have limited and eliminated termination of proceedings in a lot of cases. So previously we were able to just end deportation proceedings for some people. We can't do that anymore. They issued another case limiting asylum based on family membership. This is really important for people who are living in countries where there's a lot of gang-based violence. So let's say that a cartel targets a family member and other members of that family are in danger. The Attorney General issued a decision saying, no, that's not going to qualify for asylum. They issued another decision which narrows and eliminates relief. It's something called cancellation of removal. It's a remedy for people who have lived in the US over 10 years, have not been convicted of disqualifying offenses, and can show exceptional and extremely unusual hardship to a spouse, parent, or child who's legal. Okay, very narrow group of people, but they've narrowed it even more and eliminated that relief for a lot of those applicants as well. There were two decisions that came out from the Attorney General recently. These actually came out during coronavirus, which limited relief for deportation for victims of torture. So these were people who had been tortured in their country, and the Attorney General felt that he had issued two separate decisions limiting the instances under which these people could obtain relief under the Convention Against Torture, which is something that the United States has recognized, that we will grant relief to people who have been victims of torture. That's been limited as well. The other thing that the administration has been doing is packing the courts and curtailing the independence of immigration judges. And they've done that through a host of measures. Attorney General Barr implemented an immigration judge hiring plan that shortens time and actually gave preference to judges with high asylum denial rates. So some of these judges who deny, 85, 95% of asylum cases they see are the people who are prioritized for higher judicial positions. During COVID-19, the director of the immigration courts tried to buy out the remaining members of the Board of Immigration Appeals, sent out a memo during COVID. And then they also issued a rule expanding the judges from 21 to 23, tried to buy out the remaining judges, and then they hired 3 new judges with asylum rates around 96%, asylum denial rates of around 96%. So remember, when we go to court with an immigrant, we first go to that Executive Office of Immigration Review, and then our next level is the Board of Immigration Appeals. And so that level for us is becoming increasingly useless, really. I mean, we can pretty much expect a denial. And most immigrants can't go that next step, which would be to the federal court. They made an attempt to decertify the Immigration Judges Union. And again, this was prior to COVID and was going on under COVID. In January of this year, they forbid immigration judges from talking to the public about the cases that they work on, and they could be disciplined or fired for talking about their work. Immigration judges previously have been allowed to talk about what they do, and that's important. It's really important that the public understand what happens in immigration courts, right? But if immigration judges aren't allowed to talk about that, it's pretty hard for a lot of us to figure out what's going on. But they can now forbidden from talking about it, and their union has sued. They've just sued in July to try to overturn that rule. And then this month in August, they issued a new rule that would limit even further the power of the Board of Immigration Appeals and would severely impact the due process rights of immigrants. It would provide for expedited decisions so that the Board of Immigration Appeals could summarily dismiss a lot of appeals. And it would also provide for less time for preparation. So for example, now if I'm preparing an appeal, and if I need more briefing time, I can get up to 90 days. They would shorten that to 14 days. So really, if this rule goes through, my ability to do my job is severely lessened. I can't provide meaningful representation to people under these rules, quite honestly. So, do we need questions at this point, people? We good to just keep plowing on?
If anyone has a question that relates directly to what Kim is saying now, you can go ahead and put that in the chat and we'll ask that. But so far, Kim, we have some general questions for the end of the presentation, but nothing directly related to what you were just talking about.
Okay, great.
So go ahead.
Okay, all right. Okay, so so we saw what the administration has done with deportations. We're seeing what they're doing in the courts, and a lot of those things that I just talked about in the courts happened during this year, happened during 2020. A lot of those changes, the judges and the asylum rules and the Board of Immigration rules. Let's talk a little bit about asylum. Asylum seekers have been a particular target of this administration. We grant asylum to people in this country because we are participants in international agreements that we will take people who are fleeing persecution in their country of origin, that we will accept refugees. And this administration has taken it upon themselves to completely dismantle that system. And they're doing a good job, unfortunately, without ever changing the law. Okay, let's keep in mind that everything we're talking about, and if you look at that 126-page document, everything in that document was done without Congress. None of this has involved a change of law. None of this has involved Congress. So what have we done with asylum? Prior to COVID-19, there was, of course, the refugee ban. And we all remember the Muslim ban and the ban on certain refugees. The administration ended something called the Central American Minors Refugee Program. This was something started under the Obama administration. Hugely important, in my opinion. When we look at people from Central America, when we look at some of the children coming from Central America, without authorization and arriving at our border, a significant number of those kids have a parent in the United States already. Those parents maybe came during the Central American civil wars. Some of those parents maybe have temporary protected status, which doesn't allow you to apply for derivatives. So the Obama administration set up a process where those parents, for example, in temporary protected status, they could apply for legal permission for their children to come from Central America. Great idea, right? We eliminated that. They reduced refugee admissions. Prior to COVID, they were already narrowing the asylum eligibility. We talked about some of that, about the particular social group, asylum for victims of violence from private actors. And they made some changes to credible fear interviews prior to COVID. This has continued while we have all been busy trying to keep ourselves safe and healthy. So while we're all worried about COVID-19, the Trump administration has been trying to figure out how to keep more refugees from reaching the country. They suspended refugee admissions in March. Okay, they placed a ban on asylum seekers and began a program of summary returns, just summarily returning people back to their country who got to the border. Prior to COVID, the administration started a program, the Migrant Protection Protocol, most of us know it as Remain in Mexico, where people were forced to stay in Mexico. So Central Americans and Mexicans who were seeking asylum were not allowed into this country to avail themselves of courts in this country, but had to remain in Mexico. They set up tent cities for courts, they had video courts. It's been litigated several times. The administration at this point has been permitted to go ahead with it despite the litigation. But what they did during COVID was suspend a lot of those hearings. So a lot of these asylum seekers who are sleeping outdoors at the border in very, very dangerous conditions haven't been able to have their hearings, and they've just been waiting months and months and months sitting on the border. In June, the administration, June of this year, during COVID, the administration proposed new asylum regulations, which would significantly change asylum. It would raise the bar for credible fear screenings at the border, so that people would have to show a lot more to even be able to apply for asylum. It would eliminate many grounds for asylum that we currently have under asylum law. It would allow judges to reject an asylum application even without a hearing. So let's say that, you know, a woman and a child get to the border, and of course you only have a limited amount of time in which you can submit an application, and maybe they get someone to just help them fill that out. It's not very well prepared. They submit that. At this point, if I get that client later, I can amend their application, and I can, you know, we can prepare a lot of evidence. But what this would allow judges to do is take a look at that hastily prepared application and just reject the case outright. Never give them a chance to provide, present evidence or a testimony. It would provide a ban on people who pass through a third country. So if you're coming from Guatemala and you go through Mexico, you wouldn't be allowed to apply for asylum here. And it would apply new grounds for what are called frivolous asylum applications. Now, a frivolous application means an application in which the applicant did not tell the truth. So you just made stuff up, right? And the consequences of a frivolous application are severe. You can be prevented for the rest of your life from ever getting any sort of immigration benefit in the United States. What this proposal would do is that it would expand the circumstances under which people could be accused of having submitted a frivolous application. Very serious consequences. In July, during COVID, the government proposed a ban on asylum seekers who travel through countries, quote, affected by a serious disease, COVID-19, right? So that would be everybody. And they've also attacked asylum work permits for people who are seeking asylum. So current law allows people to, people who are applying for asylum after their application has been pending for 6 months, well, yeah, for 6 months, they can apply for a work permit. It's always been the law. And this government has just changed that. First, and the law says that they have to process those work permits in 30 days. So you're allowed at the 5th month after your application is pending for asylum, you can apply for a work permit, and then that's supposed to arrive in 30 days. That's been the law forever. And this is really important. I mean, if you think about people applying for asylum who need to hire an attorney, if they don't have employment authorization, how in the heck are they supposed to hire an attorney? And if they don't hire an attorney, how in the heck are they supposed to prepare a very, very complex asylum case and then present that case to a judge with an opposing government attorney? It's impossible. It really is. So work permits are important. Government eliminated the 30-day processing time. And then stated that instead of waiting 6 months, that asylum seekers have to wait 1 year before they qualify for a work permit. Remember, there's a pilot program that says that people only have 1 year to fight their case. So those families would never qualify for a work permit, or will not now, actually, because this is into effect. This is already in effect. It presents new fees, and there's also new restrictions. So people have to show how they entered, and it would ban, they want to ban work permits for people who entered without inspection. So people who crossed a border and then turned themselves in seeking asylum wouldn't be able to get employment authorization. Okay, deep breath. Any questions? Are we ready to move on? It's a lot. It's a lot. And now what I want to talk about is to move away from asylum and from detention, but talk about really like the core of legal immigration in this country. And even though this administration has said from the go that they want to eliminate family-based immigration, those of us who do the work thought, you know, they can't do that without Congress, right? That takes an act of Congress. And so we should be okay. But under COVID, it didn't take an act of Congress. And what this administration did under COVID was basically dismantle our system of lawful immigration. And here's how they did it. First in March, they suspended all routine visa services abroad. Okay, so remember when we talked about the vast majority of vast majority of green cards come from people who have a family member petition, and the vast majority of those cases are processed overseas, right? So suspended routine visa services. Then in April, the president issued a proclamation, which he extended in June of this year. And what he did is what no other country has done under COVID. And rather than use public health as the reason for the prohibition, what the president did is he used economic reasoning. And by using economic reasoning, he can extend these restrictions well past the end of COVID, right? So we can get the vaccination we're all waiting for, but we're still going to have economic damage for COVID. And what this president did is he framed this as an economic issue. And so he said that we need to restrict immigration because COVID has impacted our economy and we need to save these precious jobs for US workers. And so under the stated purpose, what he did then is to end, pretty much end family-based immigration. So he put an end to residencies obtained in the consulate. Okay, now remember, most residencies are family-based and most family-based residencies are in the consulate. He stopped family-based immigration without an act of Congress. The only people who can now get an appointment once the consulates reopen will be spouses of US citizens. Interesting, coming from a guy whose spouse is from another country, right? Spouses of US citizens and children, minor children of US citizens. But the adult children of US citizens won't be able to immigrate anymore from outside of the country. Parents of US citizens won't be able to immigrate anymore. Siblings of US citizens will no longer be able to immigrate. The spouses of green card holders are no longer able to immigrate. The minor children of green card holders are no longer able to immigrate. And the adult children of green card holders are no longer able to immigrate to the United States. This is hugely impactful. It's impactful in the short term because a lot of people are now stuck in their country of origin. So we have cases of US citizens in this country who have filed for family members, or green card holders, lawful permanent residents in this country who have filed for family members, and those family members can no longer come here. They're stuck. And it's going to have a huge in the future, especially if this administration is given another term, and if they can use this economic justification to keep these restrictions in place. Interestingly enough, while the underlying justification is economic, this did not, this proclamation exempts a lot of temporary workers. So people could come in temporarily and pick your fruit, and that doesn't hurt US workers somehow, but people can't come in permanently to be with their children or to be with their spouse. The impact of this is most severe on families. As I mentioned, most green card holders are family members, and most of those are processed at the consulate. It's estimated that if this continues, that over 280,000 family members and that this in the coming year won't get their residency. That's as opposed to about 28,000 employment-based applicants for green cards. So we can see what he's doing here, right? Okay. So that's what's happening overseas, and that's what happened under COVID. But what's happening here at home? Remember when we talked at the very beginning how people get their status, and we talked about the administration that does the laws. We mentioned U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. That's the office in the United States under the Department of Homeland Security that issues benefits to people who are applying in the United States. So if you're one of those few family members who's actually in the U.S. and you qualify to fix your status in the U.S., you would then apply at U.S. CIS for your residency. So what's going on with that agency? Well, USCIS is completely fee-based agency. So that means that they don't get specific money from Congress, that they use those immigration fees to pay their staff. And under this administration, they have huge shortfalls. Why is that? Well, there's been a decrease in applications, and this administration has mismanaged the money. They have doubled spending on fraud, protection, and investigation. So even the most straightforward application is now subjected to this really heightened scrutiny, which takes a lot of their resources. They've tripled spending on vetting of applications. So trying to decide not who qualifies, but who doesn't qualify. So they've mismanaged their money. They are now threatening to furlough the majority of their workforce, and Congress has been reluctant to release funds because they've mismanaged the money. So the furlough threat has been kind of ongoing. It doesn't look at this point like we're going to get furloughed, but it's a continuing problem. The administration is raising fees. This was proposed actually in February of this year. It becomes effective in October. The fee increases are huge. Some of the fee increases are 300. There's one application that we file for family members of victims of crimes that's going up 325%. Citizenship applications, the cost will about double. And they're proposing a fee for asylum applications. If we charge a fee for asylum applications, which we will be doing in October, we will join the only 3 other countries in the world that charge refugees a fee for their application. So it will be Australia, Fiji, and Iran, and the United States. The only 4 countries on the planet that charge victims of persecution a fee to submit an application. USCIS is experiencing huge processing delays. In June of 2020, during coronavirus, they ended their contract with the agency that printed out green cards and work permits. And so they ended that in June of 2020. By July of 2020, we had a backlog of 115,000 work permits and green cards that weren't being issued. The processing time for applications has more than doubled, and overall case processing time has gone up 101% under this administration. It is taking forever to get things done. And previously, for example, a work permit was always processed in 90 days. Those work permits are taking 6 to 8 months now. Ridiculous. They're also proposed in July updates to their policy manual, which would expand discretion and give, it instructs people who review applications to consider all factors, negative and positive, and not just eligibility. First of all, this is to take more time. Second of all, it's going to result in a lot more denials, and it's going to make benefits a lot harder for people to obtain. So previously, their mission was to look at an application and see if someone qualified. Okay, I'm submitting an application for residency. Do I meet this set of qualifications under the law for residency? Now, if I submit my application for residency, first they see if I qualify, and then they look and say, oh, well, what are the good things she's done? What are the bad things she's done? Do we really feel like she deserves this? So it's designed to allow them, or actually instruct them, to reject more applications. Okay, what else is USCIS doing? Well, this actually affects the consular processing as well, but it's something called public charge. Does anybody remember public charge? Public charge, there was a lot of publicity about public charge, which was the intent of the administration. Public charge, a lot of people believe it means that if someone received like food stamps or welfare, they can't get immigration status. It's not actually what it is, but one of the intentions of this proposal was to discourage immigrants who have family members who qualify for those benefits from applying. And it was very successful in that. Another goal of the public charge change has been to reduce the number of low-income people who come to the United States and to reduce family-based immigration because a lot of people who come as family members won't be able to meet these criteria. It started in February. It stopped because of litigation during COVID, and now it's back in full force, except in 3 or 4 states because of litigation. It's estimated that about 70% of applicants for residency have at least one of the characteristics that's viewed negatively under the public charge analysis. So the public charge analysis looks at your entire history and decides whether in fact there's a chance that you will be an economic burden to the United States. What are the things they look at? Do you speak English? Do you have an education? Do you have higher education? Do you have a work history? Do you have money in the bank? Do you have good credit? Do you have health insurance? A lot of the things that these family members won't be able to qualify for. So during COVID-19, the administration is continuing to apply this test to people who are applying for legal residency. All right, so that's what we have kind of at USCIS. Another thing I just want to touch on is DACA. DACA is Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. I think everybody knows that DACA was an executive order by President Obama. The Trump administration, one of the first things that they did is try to end DACA. It was litigated, went to the Supreme Court. In June, the Trump administration lost in the Supreme Court. But what the Supreme Court said was basically not that they could not end DACA, but that they could not end DACA that way. So everyone was very hopeful that because they lost at the Supreme Court, that this administration would pay attention to what the Supreme Court said and reopen DACA, but they did not, of course. They did not pay attention to what the Supreme Court said, and instead they issued a memo in July, partially rescinding DACA and stating that they are considering ending it in another manner, and it's under consideration, and while it's under consideration, there will be no new DACA applications, that all new renewals will be reviewed on a case-by-case basis. That's a much stricter standard than we had before. They're asking, they're now only going to issue deferred action for 1 year instead of 2. So what does that mean for people? You have to apply in the last 5 months of your DACA status, okay? So if I'm granted DACA in January of 2020, then I have to apply after I've had it, and I have to apply in the last 5 months. So halfway through, basically. Halfway through my DACA, I have to apply again. So pretty much every 6 months, you're sending the government money for your status. And because of processing delays, there's absolutely no guarantee that you will get your new DACA card before your old DACA card expires. So a lot of people who have DACA have employers who check those cards, and they will lose their work if they don't have a new card before the old card expires. And this administration said, we do not guarantee that we can process your card in 5 months. So it's going to cause tremendous hardship for these applicants. And then they also restricted the ways that DACA people can leave the country. So again, that's where we are with DACA. We can fully anticipate that if there is another, if this administration is given another term, that they will end DACA. And finally, with the border. What's the government doing at the border? Under COVID, in 2019, we talked earlier about the Remain in Mexico, the MPP program that's been expanded. They're still keeping people down at the border. They've used COVID-19 as an excuse to close the US-Mexico border. Under COVID-19, the administration has placed a ban on travel from 31 countries. And then the administration dug up a 1944 public health statute and used that under COVID to ban asylum seekers. So under that law, they are They are sending people back to their countries without even screening them for asylum. In June, and it's been very effective. For example, in June 2019, 10,847 people were screened at the southern border for asylum. In June of 2020, 622 people were screened at the border for asylum. That is not because these people's countries are more safe. That is not because people are no longer fleeing to the United States. It's because when they get here, they're turning them immediately around and not even giving them the opportunity to express their need for asylum. And they have expanded thousands of unaccompanied minor children under the guise of COVID-19. Federal law, so unaccompanied minor children are children under the age of 18 who arrive at the border of the United States without either parent. And federal law requires that the United States accept these children and then place them with the Office of Refugee Resettlement. That is the law. What this administration is doing is not letting these children in. The Border Patrol previously, last year, this year in April of 2020, they apprehended about 725 unaccompanied minor children. And of those 725 minor children, only 2 per day were allowed to enter the country. Okay, so probably about 60 kids were allowed to enter and were referred to the Office of Refugee Resettlement. The rest of those kids were immediately sent back to dangerous countries. The government under COVID it was discovered that the government was secretly detaining children in hotels and that it did that about 200 times before sending them back. So some of these 725 kids that came in were kept in hotels. Some of them were kept for up to 2 weeks and then they were sent back. Under these COVID restrictions and the COVID expulsions, it's estimated that they have expelled about 100,000 people through July of this year. And then of course we have the wall. Finally, last but not least, we have the wall. What has the government done under COVID about the wall? During COVID, the government diverted $7.2 billion from the Pentagon for wall construction. During COVID, the government has continued to transfer public lands for wall construction. During COVID-19, the government has continued to waive environmental and contracting laws to build that wall. And during COVID-19, the government has continued to deploy National Guard and active duty troops to the border. So I want us to have a little conversation because this is really important, but I think what I want you to get out of this is to realize that this administration had goals related to immigrants and immigration and people of color coming to this country. And they have succeeded in meeting many of these goals, and they have succeeded in doing that without ever getting the permission of Congress and without actually changing the immigration statutes. The executive branch has a tremendous amount of power in immigration, and if given another 4 years, people like me will not be able to do their job. I do my job, I take cases because I can help people. But if we have 4 more years, I can't help people.
Kim, thank you so much for the heart and the amount of brains and analysis that you put into your cases. And we know that for you and for the whole immigration legal community, the last 4 years have been almost impossible, not to mention for your clients. And so in Isaac, we really feel like it's our duty for us to be sharing this information forward. And we know that we're getting bombed by media, articles, but to have the opportunity to get this information broken down like this in almost a graduate level class of what's been happening is just so invaluable. And we thank you for your time in bringing it to us. I've received several questions by private chat, and I want to encourage others to go ahead and put questions in the chat if you have them now. we may not be able to get to all of them. And I also just added in the chat, once again, a set of really important links that Kim had sent us. This is so much information. So if you want to take some time, visit those links and read through them. You know, this could take months for you to just work through some of those changes, but we will make this recording available. I think I'm going to probably have to listen to it 2 or 3 more times. We want to ask you all to share it forward. It's our responsibility to share this forward with our family, our friends, our faith communities, our organizations, our book study groups, and then have conversation. Get in touch with your elected officials. Let them know that you're deeply concerned. Get in touch with candidates. Let them know that this is of import to you, to your family, to your community, to your organization, to your faith community. And we will just try to do our part that we can do to make Kim's job easier in the next 4 years with some changes. Let me start with a couple questions. We're getting a few questions that kind of mirror one another. So let's start with this one. After everything that's happened in the past 4 years, I'm deeply concerned that even with a new administration, we may never recover the damage that's been done. Trump's had a field day filling the courts and making changes, and I worry the problems are already too systemic. Could a new administration really fix any of this? That's a big one. Kim, I'll put it for the chat in the chat for you so you can, I know some of us are more visual than oral, so let me put that in there also. Okay, Kim, you're muted. You can't unmute? Let me see if I can invite you to. There you go.
Oh, yay. Okay. The phone started ringing, so I muted it, and then I couldn't.
Okay.
So the question was, is the damage too deep? Can it be undone? And what about like the appointments of federal judges? Federal judges are a huge concern. The appointments to the Board of Immigration Appeals are a huge concern. The judges that we have in immigration court are a huge concern. I mean, all of the new judges that we're getting are former prosecutors. All of them have horrible records on, for example, asylum grants. But there is a lot that can be done. I mean, a lot of the things that I talked about and a lot of the things contained in that huge document, the 126-page document, can be easily undone. Some of them are procedural. Some of them are, for example, the cases that the Attorney General cited to himself, a new Attorney General could cite to themselves, right? So, so there is a lot that could be easily undone. The judicial appointments are a problem, but I don't think that that's insurmountable. I think that if we undo some of the policy changes and some of the other things put in place, that we can still defend immigrants, and we can still have a system of legal immigration and family-based immigration, which is the foundation of this country. I mean, let's not forget, that is the foundation of immigration in this country, is family-based immigration. So that can be salvaged. And I think a lot of the due process protections for immigrants can be salvaged. The judicial appointments are a problem, of course, but we're always going to need more immigration judges, so there may be a chance for someone to balance that out.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks, Kim. Here's another question that just came in, and this brings it a bit more to the local level. It says, immigration is a federal law, but how do our local offices, such as the Larimer District Attorney, the Sheriff's Office, and our local courts and city law enforcement in both Fort Collins and Loveland, or Larimer County in general, intersect with immigration enforcement and or immigrants seeking help from the authorities? What difference could these offices make for our county and for your clients, if so inclined? And could you just explain kind of the connections between the federal level and some of our local offices there?
Sure. Yes, there are ways in which our local officials affect immigrants in our community. One is that contact with law enforcement increases your chances of being placed in removal proceedings. So to the extent that we can keep immigrant families from having contact from law enforcement, that's helpful to them. Now, people say, well, just don't commit a crime. But it's not that easy, because things like racial profiling are very, very real, okay? So my son, for example, who is Latino, has been pulled over 5 times for driving while Hispanic in Larimer County, right? Mm-hmm. So to the extent that we can work with people like the City of Fort Collins Police and the Larimer County Sheriff to prevent things like racial profiling, to prevent things like taking people into custody just because they don't have Colorado state ID, that then reduces that person's chance of coming into contact with law enforcement. Having police in the schools is also a problem for families coming into contact with law enforcement. I have had many, many clients who began a slide into the justice system, and that started with a ticket for interference with school staff. Okay, so a kid starts with an interference with school staff in 8th grade. By the time they come to me, they're 19 years old and they're in deportation proceedings, right? So to the extent that we can reduce the contact that we have with law enforcement, and I think that that helps immigrants in our community. So use more social workers, respond to you know, whether it's the police or whether it's in schools. Locally, we also rely upon local law enforcement for victims of crimes when we apply for something called a U visa, which is a visa for people who have been helpful and cooperative. And so we need our local sheriff and police and district attorney's office to sign those cases so that people can apply for those benefits. And that's been an issue in Larimer County before. We don't have a great reputation among Colorado counties for liberal signing of U visa certifications. So that's something that that helps immigrants in our community. So those are, I mean, I guess a couple ways. And then I think just that, you know, there are a lot of other things. For example, driver's licenses. That's a state issue. And the state of Colorado has granted driver's license to undocumented people. That was our state legislature. That's very important as well. There are probably a lot of things that we could do locally. Wouldn't affect immigration laws, but could affect the quality of life for immigrants in our community.
Okay, thanks, Kim. I think we're going to need to, I got a whole slew of individual questions in the chat. There are a couple that are a little more general I might ask. And then Kim, maybe you could close before we go to some announcements with, if you had to give people your 20-second speech about what can this crowd do. I can see we have almost 100 people on this call today. I see a lot of elected officials and staffers. I see candidates. I see the heads of about 15 faith communities on this call. So we have a group that are, you know, people that are in a position maybe to make some change. So what would your call be to this crowd as they share that forward? But really quickly, there was a clarification about employer visa processes and if that's changed also for employees, I think, wishing to bring workers or grant worker visas. And that was from Linda Mahan just a couple minutes ago.
So yes, so the COVID, the consular COVID restrictions also impact or eliminate applications for lawful permanent residency based upon an employment petition at the consulate. Most employment-based residencies are obtained in the United States, not at the consulate, so the impact is not as severe as it is on families. But in fact, employers can no longer bring a permanent worker in from a foreign country and have them get their residency at the consulate. There were also a lot of restrictions on employment-based visas. I don't specialize in employment-based visas. A lot of those, if you're interested in that, the document that I referred to earlier, the Migration Policy Institute, that specifically goes through all of those different employment visas and the different ways that they have been impacted. But yes, there has definitely been an impact.
Okay. Okay, but if you could ask us to do something, Kim, what do you want us to do? I know that's an almost impossible question.
I can't be, I can't tell people how to vote, but I will say that this is the most important election of our lives. And so, I mean, it's important for everything. It's important for the environment. It's important for democracy. It's important for a lot of things. From where I sit and from the cases that I see every day, it is a life and death issue. And we will not have a family-based immigration system in this country if this administration gets 4 more years. We will not have due process protections for immigrants. We will not have people joining their family members in this country if we have a new administration. What we will have is a regime of terror and a regime of expulsions and a regime of rejections. We will not live up to our ethical, moral, and legal obligations under international agreements that require us to take into our country people who are fleeing persecution. And I am very, very frightened, quite honestly. And it's been increasingly difficult to do this job. A lot of people I know are no longer doing this job. But we won't have a job to do. There really won't be anything that we can do. I think that the damage is already severe, and I think that given 4 more years, it will be irreparable. So what do? You vote. You talk to people that you're voting for about having a good platform on immigration, and it's not just enough to change administrations. We also need to make sure that people are committed to family unification, that people are committed to preserving family-based immigration in this country, that people are committed to protecting the due process rights and the constitutional rights of immigrants and of foreign-born people in this country. So it's really important that we talk to people who are running for office about that commitment. We are in really, really scary times. And we have a history of scapegoating immigrants, but the level of the attack on immigrants in this country is absolutely terrifying. And I think it should be scary for them. So what can we do? And we can vote. We can get other people to vote. We can ask our elected officials about what their position is on immigration and immigrants. We can educate ourselves. A lot of us don't even realize how immigration works. How people get a green card, how people come here, who can, who can't, how long it takes. So those sorts of things are important. You can volunteer in your community. There are a lot of organizations locally that are doing things in the community with immigrants. So I think those are kind of some of the things that people can do.
Okay, thanks so much, Kim. I'm going to turn this over to my colleague, Natalie from Isaac now, who's gonna invite some announcements, but we will definitely follow up with everyone that registered for this event and through the various listservs with copies of this video recording and some of the resources Kim sent along. And I saw a lot of questions about other resources in the chat that we don't have time to address today, but we'll send along some links for further reading. So Natalie, are you on?
I'm on. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so first I would like to invite Erica Bloom from Congressman Negus's office, who has an announcement for us.
I think I have to invite her to unmute, so let me
I
do
think
that.
so, yeah.
Great.
There you
Thank
go.
you so much for organizing this, Arpi, and thank you, Kim. It's nice I think that you and I have spoken on the phone and emailed many times over the past decade, but I don't know if we've ever met in person. So I'm the constituent advocate for Congressman Negus's office, and my focus is immigration. So I just wanted to introduce our office, because if you do live in Larimer County, my boss is your member of Congress. He also sits on the Judiciary Committee and on the Immigration Subcommittee of Judiciary. So he plays an important role in holding these agencies accountable, including ICE and USCIS. And so 2 things. One thing is that if people want to meet with me or our office to get a message to Congressman Negus of things you'd like to see him doing in Congress, Arpi can share my contact information. And as Kim just said, a lot of these changes have not been legislative changes. They've been changes made by the administration, but that still means that we have a place as Congress to basically send letters to the heads of the agencies expressing concern about these policy changes. Congressman Neguse is really good about joining onto those letters or starting them if there isn't a letter that already exists. So make sure to ask us to do that stuff. And secondly, for the individuals in our district that are waiting for these massively backlogged processes with the agencies, you can contact me and I can make a congressional inquiry on the person's behalf. And often the congressional inquiry will get that one individual person's application moving. So I wanted to offer that resource to everybody on the call.
Thanks. And if I can just jump in really quick, Arpi, really nice to see you, Erica. And one more thing that I did not add on what can people do is that one of the issues is immigration is why are people coming here? And so one thing that we do have to ask our federal representatives to do is to look at foreign policy and look at the conditions in especially our southern neighbors. And the majority of people that are coming here right now are coming here from countries like Honduras and Guatemala and El Salvador. And so we really need to ask our members of Congress, for example, to look at a country like Honduras, very dear to my heart. It's where my husband's and family and my children's family is from. And that's a dictatorship with gross human rights violations and disappearances and murders of human rights activists. And our government supports the Honduran government, despite the fact that it's a known narco state. So I think it's really important also not just to look at what we can do within our borders, but to look at what we can do outside of our borders to make it possible for people to stay in their country of origin.
Thank you, Kim. I wanted to now invite Jesus Castro from the Isaac board to make another announcement. I think is he unmuted?
Hi everyone, thank you so much.
You're unmuted. You're good.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, awesome.
We just lost you, Jesus.
He's muted again. Oh, there he
Okay, awesome, sorry. I don't know why this is so difficult, but thank you so much for being here. Seeing so many people here, it's just makes me really happy that people care about these issues and want to learn more about this. And Kim, thank you so much for always doing this kind of things. I know you for 8 years, and when we had our first DACA clinic, and Kim asked me to volunteer at this DACA clinic 8 years ago. I never thought that organizing my community was gonna become my job, and I'm really happy about that. And so thank you so much, Kim. And I'm really excited just to announce one of our upcoming events. This is a amazing collaboration between Isaac, Fuerza Latina, and Buena Vida Farm. As many of you know, Fuerza Latina has been working on a co-op that it will be run by immigrants, the leaders of Fuerza Latina. And we went through we didn't know what we were gonna do. It started as a cleaning co-op, and then now it's a food co-op. But we will have our first event on September 20th. It's called El Mercadito, and this event, we want to do this. This will be an economic and worker justice event. We will be selling tamales made by the co-op. I think we're gonna do these tamales. There'll be pork tamales, chicken tamales, corn tamales at the Foco Cafe space. So we're really excited about that. We're also there will be salsa, like a salsa kit. So we're really excited to see that too. And also we will be selling masks from Guatemala. These masks were made by women from Guatemala. So we are really, really excited. This will be except September 20th from 1 to 3, right? Correct?
I think we're looking at 12 to 3 for pickups, and it will be an order ahead and drive-by pickup just to be safe during coronavirus.
Yes, so we're still like trying to figure out the location. It's most likely going to be at the Trinity Lutheran on Stewart, but we still need to figure that out. But we're just really excited to be able to be part of this event, because this is all led by immigrants, but members of our community, by a lot of women. And we are, it's tamales too, who doesn't like tamales? So in the next, we're putting everything together. So in the next few, I think in the next week or so, we're going to be sending like a Google form with to how to make an order of tamales, salsa, and the face masks. So keep checking your email, and we'll be in contact with you guys. Thank you.
Thanks, Jesus. Now I'm gonna turn it back to Arpi, who has another announcement, and then I'll close out the time that we have here together. Oh, there you go.
I'm getting happy with that mute button. Thanks so much. I can't believe we squeezed this all into an hour and a half. We want to be respectful of people's Sunday afternoon, especially Kim, after working so hard to take us through that incredibly detailed report. I just wanted to follow up. A lot of you have been supporting Isaac's Emergency Immigration Fund, and I just want to take one brief moment to thank everyone for their generosity. And a lot of what we do on that fund does tie into the information that Kim's sharing with us today. I think a lot of you have contributed to the COVID relief initiative, which has been going on since about April. And we've been getting out, small family grants to 550 families in Larimer County who are not eligible for other types of government relief and have suffered extreme job loss during this time. But the other piece of the work that we do relates directly to a lot of what Kim is saying. And we've helped about 100 families in the last few years with things like their legal process and some fees. A group of those are unaccompanied minors that Kim spoke about. We know many of you attended the play that featured Kim's story with one of her clients, Edgar Chacoy, and we have a whole separate initiative called the Chacoy Initiative. So for youth that are able to make it into the US, that initiative helps those youth with their legal process, filing for something called SIJS, and it's a long and drawn out process. And the sooner we can get those youth in the queue to do some of their legal piece with a family lawyer in family court and juvenile court, the sooner that someone like Kim and fellow immigration attorneys can work on their cases. And these are all youth that have a real fear of return to their country of origin. And so we just want you to know, we're all distracted by this COVID moment, that work is ongoing, and that fund will be providing help for some legal clinics that are upcoming, like a citizenship clinic, precisely so that we can help families before those fee hikes go into place that Kim talked about, making some of those legal processes absolutely prohibitive for people. So we will continue to get out information and reporting on what we're doing with the money that people are contributing. And we just also want to say that it's absolutely not possible without all of you. We've received donations from over 350 people, I think, in the last several months, and that's from all across the county. So we're incredibly grateful. We'll follow up with an email that gets you that order form for the mercadito and all of that in the next couple of days. So I'll hand it back to Natalie to close us out right at 3:30. And I just want to thank you again so much, Kim, for taking the time with us.
Yeah, I wanted to say thank you to Kim also from all of us and the people who will be able to see the recording. And please share the recording of the talk with friends, family, people from your faith group, people from your office, if you feel comfortable, and even if you don't, to try to share this information, and that it was put together so clearly and concisely. I don't think any of us can learn, as Arpi said, from an article, all the things that Kim talked about today. And I just wanted to also thank again people from our state representative's office and candidates for public office and city council members for joining us, and people from different faith groups who are members of Isaac. And for those of you who are not members of Isaac, if you would like more information or information about becoming a member, or just to get on our mailing list, if you're not on our mailing list, you can email isaac.northern.colorado@gmail.com, and maybe Arpi can put that in the chat. But if you came upon this talk in a different way, just know that Isaac's strength really comes from its interfaith foundation, that we are people of many faiths who feel that our faith traditions are imperative. I mean, they're just causing us to have to stand up for the rights dignity and respect for every human being. And that's really where we're coming from. And people may say that we're being political or we're being, you know, it's not part of our purview, but really every person's rights really, and politics and all the different aspects of immigration come together in the fact that we as a nation and as human beings have to be ethical and have values that represent what our country is supposed to be about. So, so please join us, get on our mailing list, and thank you so much for joining us this afternoon.